First contact surprise. The Meridian's observation deck offered the best view of Earth anyone could ask for. But Dr. Sarah Chen wasn't here to admire her home planet. Her attention was fixed on the holographic display showing the most extraordinary data she'd ever encountered in her career as a xenophysicist. "You're absolutely certain about these readings?" she asked, turning to face Ambassador Zixtal of the Archivists. The tall, crystalline being's surface rippled with patterns of soft blue light, their species equivalent of a solemn nod. "We have verified the data through 17 independent measurements," Zixtal's translator conveyed. "The quantum decay cascade in our star system's artificial containment field is accelerating. In approximately 38 Earth months, it will fail completely." Sarah ran her fingers through her short black hair, a habit that surfaced whenever she was deep in thought. The Archivists had arrived 3 months ago, their massive ships appearing at the edge of the solar system in a display that had initially terrified Earth's population. But they came not as conquerors, they came seeking help. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Archivists were centuries ahead of humanity in most technological areas. Their civilization had mastered faster-than-light travel, created artificial worlds, and even learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Yet here they were, turning to Earth, a civilization they'd initially dismissed as barely space-capable because they'd run out of options. "The containment field's original designers," Sarah began. "Gone," Zixtal interrupted, their crystalline form darkening slightly. "The predecessors vanish over 10,000 years ago, leaving only their technology behind. We've maintained it, studied it, even improved upon some aspects. But this..." Their lights flickered in what Sarah had learned was frustration. This degradation was never supposed to happen. The field was designed to be eternal. Sarah walked to the window, watching the Earth slowly rotate below. "Nothing's eternal," she murmured. "Everything breaks down eventually. The real question is why you came to us specifically." The ambassador's surface rippled with complex patterns. "We observed something unique about your species. While your technology is primitive by our standards, your approach to problem-solving is unlike anything we've encountered. You humans have a remarkable ability to work with limited resources, to find solutions where none should exist. We've studied your history extensively since discovering your world." Sarah couldn't help but smile. "You mean we're good at fixing things we don't fully understand?" "Precisely," Zixtal confirmed. "Your species has a peculiar talent for working with incomplete information and making intuitive leaps that our more structured approach to problem-solving often misses." Sarah turned back to the holographic display, studying the complex mathematics describing the containment field's deterioration. The Archivists had built their entire civilization inside an artificial sphere surrounding their dying star, using technology they'd inherited but never fully understood. Now that technology was failing, and with it the lives of trillion beings hung in the balance. "We'll need a team," she said finally. "Not just physicists and engineers. We need people who think differently. Artists, musicians, philosophers even. The predecessors didn't just build with logic. There's an elegance to their designs that suggests something more." Zixtal's surface rippled with what Sarah recognized as confusion. Artists? Musicians? How could they possibly contribute to solving a quantum engineering crisis? "Because sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected perspectives," Sarah explained. "Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. But creativity is its father." She pulled up her tablet and began composing a list of names. Dr. James Okonjo, the quantum mechanic whose theories about wave function collapse had earned him ridicule until they were proven right. Maya Patel, the structural engineer who'd revolutionized earthquake-resistant architecture by studying spider webs. Robert Chen, no relation, the composer who developed a new mathematical framework for understanding harmony that was now being applied to everything from weather prediction to stock market analysis. I'll need unrestricted access to all your data about the containment field, Sarah continued. Everything you have, even if you think it's irrelevant. And we'll need to visit the system itself. Sometimes you have to feel a problem to solve it. Zixtal's lights pulsed rapidly, their equivalent of surprise. Feel a problem. Dr. Chen, we're talking about quantum-level engineering on a stellar scale. One cannot simply feel such things. Sarah smiled again, wider this time. Watch us. One more thing, she said to Zixtal. We're going to need a really good coffee maker on that ship of yours. Trust me on this one. The ambassador's confusion was evident, but they made a note in their own system. They were about to learn another peculiarity of humans. Sometimes the most important breakthroughs happened during coffee breaks, when minds were free to wander and make those impossible connections that just might save their world. As the Earth continued its eternal dance below them, Sarah felt the weight of what they were about to attempt. But she also felt something else, something uniquely human, hope. Because if there's one thing humans had proven throughout their history, it was that the impossible just needed a little creativity, a lot of determination, and maybe a few cups of coffee. The engineering miracle. The massive observation chamber aboard the archivist vessel, Memory of Dawn, hummed with activity. 3 weeks had passed since their arrival at the dying star system, and Dr. Sarah Chen watched as her unconventional team worked in ways that continuously baffled their alien hosts. Maya Patel sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by holographic models of the containment field structure. Instead of studying the complex quantum equations, she was playing with virtual strings, weaving them into patterns that mimicked the field's energy flows. Robert Chen had converted the field's decay patterns into sound, filling one corner of the chamber with an eerie, ever-changing symphony that he insisted helped him hear the problem. I still don't understand, Ambassador Zixtal said, their crystalline form flickering with confusion. How does this chaos contribute to a solution? Sarah watched as Dr. James Okonjo, barefoot and pacing, gestured excitedly at a wall covered in what looked like children's drawings. The predecessors didn't think in straight lines, he explained. Look at these patterns in the field matrix. They're organic, flowing. They didn't build this like engineers. They grew it, like a garden. The ambassador's lights pulsed rapidly. Grew it? That's absurd. The containment field is the most sophisticated piece of quantum engineering ever discovered. Exactly. Maya called out from her position on the floor. That's why it's failing. You've been maintaining it like a machine, but it's more like a living thing. Look at these energy pathways. She manipulated her string model, showing how the quantum fields intertwined. They're not circuits, they're more like blood vessels. Sarah smiled as she watched understanding slowly ripple across Zixtal's surface. The archivists had spent millennia treating the containment field like a complex mechanism, something to be maintained with precise, predetermined protocols. But the human team had seen something different, a system that was designed to evolve, to adapt, to grow. Robert turned down his quantum symphony long enough to join the conversation. The decay isn't a malfunction. It's more like an immune response. The field is trying to adapt to changes in the star's output, but it can't because it's been locked into rigid maintenance patterns for thousands of years. That's impossible, one of the archivist scientists interjected. Quantum fields don't adapt. They don't grow. They follow the immutable laws of physics. On the macro level, sure, James said, grabbing a marker and drawing directly on the observation window. But at the quantum level, everything's weird. Particles exist in multiple states until observed. Quantum entanglement breaks our classical understanding of cause and effect. The predecessors didn't fight quantum uncertainty. They embraced it. Sarah walked to the center of the room, where a holographic model of the entire star system floated. The containment field was visible as a complex web of energy surrounding the dying star, its patterns growing increasingly chaotic as the decay spread. But now, seeing it through her team's eyes, she could recognize something she'd missed before. It's not just a field, she said softly. It's a quantum ecosystem. And like any ecosystem, it needs diversity to survive. She turned to Zixtal. Your maintenance protocols, while well-intentioned, have been forcing it into a single state. You've been trying to preserve it, but you've actually been suffocating it. The ambassador's surface swirled with complex patterns of light. But if what you're saying is true, how do we fix it? We can't simply undo thousands of years of maintenance protocols. Maya stood up, her string model now reflecting a new pattern. We don't have to. We just need to introduce controlled chaos, give the field room to adapt again, like breaking up concrete to let plants grow. That's insane, another archivist scientist protested. The risks are less than the certainty of total failure if we do nothing, James interrupted. He pointed to his wall of drawings. Look at the underlying mathematics. The field isn't failing because it's breaking down. It's failing because it can't change. It's like a river that's been forced to flow in a straight line. Eventually, it's going to break its banks. Robert had been quiet, listening to his quantum symphony. Now he spoke up. The harmonics are all wrong. Too perfect, too rigid. We need to introduce new frequencies. Let them interact naturally. Like jazz, structure and improvisation working together. Sarah watched as the archivists tried to process this completely alien way of thinking. Their civilization had achieved incredible things through careful, methodical advancement. The idea of deliberately introducing chaos into their most critical system went against everything they believed in. Ambassador, she said gently, your people came to Earth because you recognize that humans think differently. This is what differently looks like. We see patterns in chaos, find stability in change, and build strength through adaptation. Your predecessors understood this. That's why they built the containment field the way they did. Zixtal was silent for a long moment, their surface rippling with complex calculations. Finally, they spoke. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah nodded to her team. One by one, they began explaining their parts of the solution. Maya's adaptive structural reinforcement patterns, James's quantum uncertainty channels, Robert's harmonic stabilization frequencies. It was a solution that no single human could have developed alone. It required an artist's intuition, an engineer's precision, and a physicist's understanding, all working in concert. As they talked, the holographic model in the center of the room began to change, showing how their proposed modifications would work. It was beautiful, organic, and completely unlike anything the archivists had ever attempted. It was, in every sense, a human solution to an inhuman problem. If this works, Zixtal said finally, it will revolutionize our understanding of predecessor technology. When it works, Sarah corrected with a smile, because there's one more thing humans are very good at, making the impossible possible. Cultural revelation. The preparation chamber buzzed with tension as Dr. Sarah Chen helped Maya Patil into her quantum-shielded environment suit. In 12 hours, they would attempt their first practical test of the new containment field modifications. The archivist scientists watched from behind their crystalline observation panels, their surfaces flickering with what Sarah had learned to recognize as anxiety. Did you see how they reacted when James started laughing during the briefing? Maya whispered as Sarah checked her suit seals. You'd think he'd insulted their ancestors. Sarah nodded, remembering the moment. James had spotted an elegant connection between two seemingly unrelated field harmonics and burst out laughing with pure joy at the discovery. The archivists had been scandalized by such an emotional display during a serious scientific discussion. They still don't understand us, Sarah replied softly, but they're learning. Indeed, over the past weeks, the archivists had been forced to confront something that challenged their fundamental worldview. Their society valued order, precision, and emotional restraint above all else. But watching the human team work, with all their messy emotions, intuitive leaps, and seemingly chaotic methods, had begun to shake those certainties. Ambassador Zixtal approached, their crystalline form now showing traces of green. a color Sarah had never seen in their species before. Dr. Chen, may I ask you something? Personal. Of course, Ambassador. When your team discovered the quantum harmonic patterns, you all displayed strong emotional responses. Joy, excitement, even what you call tears from Dr. Okonjo. Yet these emotions did not impair your scientific judgment. If anything, they seemed to enhance it. How is this possible? Sarah considered her response carefully. Ambassador, have you ever watched a human child learn to walk? The ambassador's surface rippled with confusion at the apparent non sequitur. I have studied human developmental footage, yes. Then you've seen how they fall, get up, fall again, laugh, cry, and keep trying. Those emotions, the frustration, the determination, the joy of success, they're not separate from the learning process. They're an essential part of it. Our emotions drive us to explore, to persist, to imagine new possibilities. But emotions are inherently irrational, one of the archivist scientists interjected. They cloud judgment, introduce bias. Robert Chen, who had been quietly adjusting his equipment nearby, joined the conversation. Do you know why I converted the field harmonics into music? He asked. Not just because it helped me understand the patterns, but because music itself is a perfect blend of mathematics and emotion. The same frequencies that can be described with perfect mathematical precision can make people laugh, cry, or fall in love. The predecessors understood this, James added, looking up from his calculations. Look at the containment field's core design. It's not just mathematically perfect, it's beautiful. They built emotion into its very structure. That's why it needs to adapt and grow. That's why treating it like a soulless machine is killing it. Sarah watched as Zixtal's surface began displaying completely new patterns, signs of deep internal conflict. The ambassador had spent more time with humans than any other archivist, and the experience was clearly changing them. When we first discovered your world, Zixtal said slowly, we dismissed your species as primitive because of your emotional nature. We saw your art, your music, your tendency to anthropomorphize everything from your machines to your stellar constellations, and we considered it a weakness, a sign of intellectual immaturity. And now, Sarah prompted gently, now I wonder if we are the ones who have been primitive. In our pursuit of perfect rationality, we forgot something the predecessors knew, that the universe itself is not purely rational. It is full of quantum uncertainty, of chaos and creativity. Perhaps emotions are not a weakness to be overcome, but a different kind of intelligence, one that we have denied ourselves for too long. The chamber fell silent as the weight of this revelation settled over everyone. The human team exchanged glances, recognizing that they were witnessing something profound, not just a scientific collaboration, but a cultural awakening. Maya spoke up, her voice soft but clear. The containment field isn't just keeping your star stable. It's been trying to tell you something all this time. Something about the nature of existence itself. About the need for balance between order and chaos, logic and emotion, stability and growth. And we could not hear it, Zixtal concluded, their surface now showing complex patterns of green and blue, because we had forgotten how to listen with anything but logic. The final preparations continued around them, but something had fundamentally changed. The archivists began asking different questions, not just about the technical aspects of the modification plan, but about human art, music, and philosophy. Some even requested to observe human children at play, finally understanding that what had looked like chaos to them was actually creativity in its purest form. As Sarah helped the last team member with their suit checks, she reflected on the true miracle unfolding here. They hadn't just found a way to save the archivist's star system. They had helped an ancient civilization rediscover something precious they had lost. The courage to feel, to imagine, to embrace the beautiful uncertainty of existence. T-minus 11 hours to field modification, announced the ship's eye. All personnel please complete final preparations. Sarah looked around at her team, human and archivist alike, and saw not just determination, but hope. Tomorrow, they would attempt something unprecedented, using emotion and intuition, as much as science and mathematics, to heal a dying star. But in many ways, they had already achieved something even more remarkable. They had proved that the greatest breakthroughs come not from abandoning our humanity, but from embracing it fully. Crisis point. The control chamber of the Memory of Dawn thrummed with energy as final preparations were made for the containment field modifications. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the central console, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time data from 1,000 different sensors. The dying star loomed before them, its unstable corona visible even through the vessel's heaviest filters. Quantum harmonics stabilized, Robert Chen reported, his fingers dancing across his modified control interface that now displayed field data as musical wavelengths. Ready to begin primary sequence. Structural reinforcement patterns in place, Maya added from her station, where her string theory-inspired modifications waited to be implemented. Field lines are aligned. James Okonjo's voice came through the comm system from his position in the auxiliary control room. Uncertainty channels mapped and ready. We'll only have a 4-minute window once we begin. The archivist scientists watched with a mixture of hope and trepidation, their crystalline forms showing complex patterns of blue, green, and colors Sarah had never seen before. Ambassador Zixtel stood beside her at the central console, their surface rippling with nervous energy. Dr. Chen, they said quietly, if this fails. It won't, Sarah interrupted, then caught herself. I mean, yes, there's a risk. But this is our moment. Everything we've learned, everything we've discovered about how the predecessors thought. It all comes down to this. Zixtel's surface flickered. How can you be so certain? The calculations show a 31.7% chance of catastrophic failure. Sarah smiled, despite the tension. Because sometimes you have to trust more than just the numbers. Ready to begin on my mark. She took a deep breath, looking at each member of her team in turn. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, combining human intuition with archivist precision to create something entirely new. The containment field modifications weren't just a technical solution. They were a bridge between two ways of thinking about the universe itself. Beginning primary sequence in 3, 2, 1, mark. The first changes rippled through the containment field, visible as waves of energy spreading across its surface. Robert's quantum harmonics began their work, introducing new frequencies that would allow the field to adapt and grow. Maya's structural reinforcements activated, providing pathways for the energy to flow naturally rather than forcing it into rigid patterns. For the first minute, everything proceeded exactly as planned. The field began to pulse with new life, its patterns shifting and flowing like a living thing. Sarah felt her heart lift. It was working. Then everything went wrong. Energy spike in Sector 7. One of the archivist scientists shouted, "Field integrity dropping. The harmonics are destabilizing," Robert reported, his hands flying over his controls. "The old patterns are fighting the new ones." Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't in any of their simulations. The field wasn't just failing to accept their modifications. It was actively rejecting them, like an immune system attacking a foreign body. "James," she called over the comm, "what are you seeing in the uncertainty channels?" "It's chaos, Sarah. The quantum states are collapsing faster than we can track them. It's like, wait." There was a pause, then his voice came back, excited despite the crisis. "It's like they're searching." Searching. For what? A pattern. Not our pattern. Their own. The field isn't rejecting our changes. It's trying to incorporate them, but can't find the right configuration. Maya's voice cut through the growing chaos. The field doesn't want to be told what to do. It needs to figure it out for itself. Just like when I was learning traditional Indian dance. My teacher couldn't just show me the moves. I had to feel them. Let my body find its own way to express them. Sarah's mind flashed back to watching human children learn to walk. "We can't force it," she whispered, then louder. Everyone, stop trying to implement the changes. Pull back to minimum guidance levels. What? Zixtal's surface flashed with alarm. But the field will collapse. No, Sarah said with sudden certainty. We need to trust it, like trust falls in team-building exercises. You have to let go to prove you believe. For a moment, no one moved. Then Robert understood. Like jazz improvisation, you set up the basic chord progression, and then let the musicians find their way. Exactly. Maya, convert your reinforcement patterns to passive guidance modes. Robert, shift your harmonics to suggestion frequencies only. James, open the uncertainty channels to maximum bandwidth, but remove all forcing functions. The team moved quickly, transforming their carefully planned modifications into something more like gentle suggestions. The field's violent reaction began to subside, but now new patterns were emerging, patterns none of them had predicted. Incredible, one of the archivist scientists whispered. It's learning. They watched in awe as the containment field began to change itself, using their modifications not as a template, but as inspiration. It was finding its own way to grow, to adapt, to heal. Field integrity stabilizing, Maya reported. No, more than stabilizing. It's getting stronger. The harmonics, Robert added, wonder in his voice. They're beautiful. It's creating its own music. Through it all, Sarah stood at the central console, tears floating freely in the low gravity. They had succeeded, but not in the way they had planned. Instead of imposing their solution, they had given the field the tools and freedom to find its own. Zixtal's surface was a riot of colors. In all our history, they said softly, we never imagined. We thought we had to control everything. But sometimes the greatest control comes from letting go. That's humanity's greatest secret, Sarah replied, watching as the star system's ancient guardian renewed itself before their eyes. We're at our best, not when we try to force the universe to do what we want, but when we learn to dance with it. The crisis wasn't completely over. It would take hours for the field to fully stabilize in its new configuration. But as Sarah looked around the control chamber at her team's faces, human and archivist alike, she saw the same expression on all of them. The pure joy of discovery, of watching something beautiful and unexpected emerge from the chaos of creation. Legacy of Two Worlds. 3 months after the successful stabilization of the containment field, the observation deck of the Memory of Dawn hosted a very different kind of gathering. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a mixed audience of humans and archivists, her presentation displaying the final analysis of what many were now calling the quantum renaissance. The containment field isn't just stable, she explained, gesturing to the holographic display showing the star system. It's thriving. The quantum patterns we're observing suggest it's actually more robust than it was during the height of the predecessor's era. The star pulsed with healthy light behind her, its energy now wrapped in a containment field that rippled with complex, ever-changing patterns. But the real miracle wasn't just the saved star system. It was what the experience had taught both civilizations. Ambassador Zixtal, their crystalline form now regularly displaying the new colors that had emerged during the crisis, stepped forward. The Council of Archivists has reached a unanimous decision, they announced. We are formally requesting the establishment of a permanent human presence in our system and the creation of a joint institute of quantum emotional studies. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Maya Patel, sitting in the front row, couldn't suppress a grin. Quantum emotional studies, she whispered to Robert Chen. Now that's something I never thought I'd hear an archivist say. The events of the past months have shown us something profound, Zixtal continued. The predecessors did not just leave us their technology. They left us a message, one that we, in our pursuit of pure logic, were unable to comprehend until now. The ambassador's surface rippled with new patterns as they spoke. They built emotion, adaptation, and growth into their greatest works because they understood what we had forgotten, that the universe itself is not a machine to be controlled, but a dance to be joined. Sarah watched as James Okonkwo, now deeply engaged in teaching archivist scientists about the role of intuition in quantum mechanics, nodded in approval. The barriers between human and archivist approaches to science were breaking down, creating something new and powerful. But this is more than just a scientific revelation, Sarah added, taking her place beside Zixtal. What we've discovered here challenges our fundamental understanding of intelligence itself. The archivists achieved incredible things through logic and precision. We humans reached for the stars through passion and intuition. But together, she smiled. Together, we're learning there never should have been a divide between the two. The holographic display shifted to show new data, the results of experiments where human and archivist scientists had worked together, combining their approaches. The achievements were staggering. Quantum computing breakthroughs, new insights into consciousness itself, even the first hints of understanding how the predecessors had achieved their greatest works. The containment field was never meant to be static, Robert Chen added from his seat. Just like music isn't meant to be played the same way every time. The predecessors built growth and change into everything they created because they understood that's how the universe itself works. Maya stood up, unable to contain her excitement. And now we're seeing the same patterns everywhere we look. The way planets form, the way galaxies spiral, the way life itself evolves. It's all a balance between structure and chaos, logic and intuition, precision and creativity. The audience, human and archivist alike, absorbed these revelations with a sense of wonder. The archivists were learning to embrace emotion not as a weakness, but as another form of intelligence. The humans were learning to integrate their intuition with more rigorous analysis. Both species were growing, changing, becoming more than they had been. There's an old human saying, Sarah continued, looking out at the assembled crowd. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We came together to solve a crisis, but we've discovered something far more valuable, a new way of understanding the universe and our place in it. She gestured to the healthy star burning behind her. This isn't just a technical achievement. It's proof that the greatest breakthroughs come not from conquering our differences, but from celebrating them. Not from imposing our will on the universe, but from learning to work with its natural rhythms and patterns. The predecessors, Zixtal added, their surface showing beautiful, complex patterns that would have been impossible for them months ago, did not disappear. They evolved, and perhaps they left their works behind not just as tools, but as teachers, waiting for the moment when we were ready to understand their greatest lesson. Which is? Asked one of the younger archivist scientists. Sarah and Zixtal shared a look before responding together. That the universe itself is both poetry and mathematics, both music and physics, both emotion and logic, and that true wisdom lies not in choosing between them, but in learning to embrace them all. As the presentation concluded and the gathered scientists broke into smaller discussion groups, Sarah found herself back at the window where this all began. Earth was not visible from here, but she could feel its influence, the chaotic, beautiful, emotional planet that had shaped her species and given them the very qualities needed to solve this crisis. What comes next? Zixtal asked, joining her at the window. Sarah smiled, watching as human and archivist scientists excitedly shared ideas, their different approaches to understanding the universe no longer a barrier but a source of strength. Everything, she replied. We've only just begun to understand what we can achieve together. The predecessors didn't leave us their technology as a crutch, but as a first step. Now it's our turn to take the next one. Beyond the window, the star pulsed with healthy light, its quantum containment field shimmering with patterns that were neither purely logical nor purely intuitive, but something gloriously, perfectly in between. It was a testament not just to what humanity could achieve, but to what all species could become when they learned to embrace both the mathematics and the music of the universe.